This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Welcome to The Clash, where we take a real world and allow it to clash into our faith. The culture clashes into what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And the end result, hopefully, is something that will encourage you, strengthen you, entertain you, and make you glad that you're watching this show. I'm joined by Chris Whaley, the Saint. And Chris, we are getting ready again to talk with somebody that if we have wrestling fans that watch us, and I know we do, they know who this guy is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You think about all that this guy has done. I mean, he is a former WWE champion. He is a WWE Hall of Famer, Intercontinental champ, had about 11 years of tag team championships, and also the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. Jeff, if I was just sitting at home in my recliner and had a pen and I was doodling and saying, who would be a great person to have on The Clash? I couldn't have picked a better person than the one that we got in Glenn Jacobs.
No, he really is. He is, most of you, if you're wrestling fans, you know him and remember him as Kane. Mm-hmm. You remember him wearing the mask. You remember taking the mask off. You remember, you might even remember him starring in a couple WWE-produced movies. Yep. Where they were kind of horror films. He was a bad guy in those. I mean, he has done it all when it comes to wrestling. Right. And now he is kind of fleshing out his life in a political arena. Yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to get to have an opportunity to talk to him about his faith journey, right, what Jesus means to him, and how that has kind of carried him and placed him where he is today. And it is a fascinating conversation. Right. So I'm thrilled that our audience gets to hear it.
Yep, they get to see part two.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Hey, one of my best friends is Mark Merrow. And I want to read you, I told him we were going to be interviewing you, and he said, Glenn was my first ever match in the WWE. He was the character Isaac Yankem. He was able to take all my high-flying moves. He made me shine that night. And being my first ever match in WWE, I wanted to make a great impressive impression. He is one of the most talented big men out there, but even better, he is a brother in Christ. That's from Mark Merrow. So I told him I was going to share that with you. But hey, can you tell us about your journey of faith?
Yeah, I appreciate those words. That's very, very nice. For years, I guess I was just kind of lost. I've always considered myself a good person, right? I think I have a pretty good moral compass, but I just, just kind of lost. And eventually, I think that we all start questioning, what is this all about? Why am I doing this? What's life all about? And all those sort of things. And those can lead to some very uncomfortable conversations with yourself, right? For me, it was just, I didn't know. And it was that questioning that, kind of made me become in when I was a kid. My dad was Catholic, my mom was Presbyterian. I would always go to my dad I would always go to church with my dad. But I fell away, through high school and then through college, and frankly didn't have some great experiences when I was a kid with religion and with the church. And I realize now part of that was just my own just being judgmental, which I shouldn't have been, but I'm a flawed human being and I was a kid. What can I say? But it was that, and I started going to church and started reading the Bible. then I realized, that's really what this whole thing is about. What resonated with me the most about the Bible is when Jesus talks about the two great commandments, that you're to love God with everything, with your spirit, mind, and body, and you love your fellow human, your neighbor, as you would love yourself. And then you just read what Jesus talks about in the Bible, and it's just really it's really good stuff, right? Um, but then for a long time too, I had what I would think would be kind of an academic relationship with the Lord, and what I mean by that was, um, in my head,
Hmm.
I got it, but not so much in my heart.
Right.
Okay. Um, then one day I'm at church, and pastor is talking about, you know in Christianity we debate about all these different things. Okay, is this part of the Bible, that part of the Bible, what's right, what's whatever. He said there's one thing though that is it's the core, and it's the one thing that you can't argue about. And he was like, that's the resurrection.
Hmm.
And all the other stuff, okay, great, but that's the thing. And then I realized, oh my gosh, he's exactly right. This guy, Jesus, was sent here, and I mean was tortured horrifically, died on a cross, was put in a tomb, and all this is for me, right? And assuming my sins, put into a tomb, and then 3 days later lived again,
Hmm.
because he he that was for me so that I could live with him. And then, then you realize that that's incredibly humbling. But you also think it's like, there's, you know, no matter how broken you are, no matter how worthless you might think you might be, no matter what you've done, that's for you. It doesn't matter. You're someone in the eyes of the Lord. Um, and that's just powerful stuff.
Wow.
And when I came to that realization, I was like, oh well, my perspective on everything changed.
Yeah.
And I think that'll do that to you. And then you realize, I don't need um, I don't need any sort of affirmation, or I don't need other people. I don't care what other people think about me anymore.
Hmm.
Um, all I have to be is I just have to be good with the Lord, and that's what I try to do. And obviously, I believe that being a Christian means you do have to be a good person.
Oh, sure.
That's where that part about treating your neighbor,
Yeah.
loving your neighbor like you would yourself.
That's
I
awesome.
think a lot more Christians need to observe that, because that's what he was saying.
That's
when
awesome.
when you love your neighbor like yourself, that's loving God
That's
as
awesome.
well.
Amen.
So yeah, it just changed. But at the same time, all this other stuff that we worry about, it's not even important.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
Yeah.
And when you focus on that, again, I no longer feel like I'm lost anymore. Now, not that I've got it all figured out by any stretch of the imagination, but I know that there's a point to all of this.
Yeah. That's awesome. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, how did I mean, share with us a little bit too. I mean, because obviously, you've over the course of your lifetime, you've had a lot of media spotlight. You are beloved and hated, but you get the reaction as a wrestler. How were you able to kind of keep faith where it needed to be and kind of use that as your center to kind of navigate that? Because I mean, that's tough when you're in the spotlight and you've got all sorts of demands, people, expectations on you.
Critics.
Critics and fans. I mean, how did that work? How did you manage to balance that out?
For me, the Lord has just kind of blessed me with, I don't know if it's humility or groundedness. I just never bought into any of the hype.
Okay.
I've always been Glenn. That's who I am. And all this other stuff. I mean, the only thing that separates me from the people living under the bridge is the grace of God and opportunities that He has given me.
Amen.
And I am acutely aware of that. And I think to myself, I could have made a bad decision here, or even the decision that didn't turn out like it did, and I'd be right there.
Mm.
So I'm just nothing special. I
No.
mean, I've been incredibly blessed in this world. but I'm nothing special. But because I have been incredibly blessed in this world, I believe that I do have an obligation, to love my neighbor as much as I possibly can. But
Yeah.
people ask me, what's the best thing that ever happened in my wrestling career?
Yeah.
And the best thing that ever happened in my wrestling career actually happened after my career was basically over. My wife and I were at a concert at Thompson Bowling Arena here on the campus of the University of Tennessee. And I was out in the concourse getting popcorn and soda, and this lady came up to me and said that she wanted to show me something. And she pulls out her phone and she starts scrolling through pictures on her phone, and then she stops and shows me a picture of me with a little boy in a hospital bed. And I had visited him at East Tennessee Children's Hospital.
Mhm.
And then she told me that was the last picture she had of her son while he
Oh.
was still.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I realized even the wrestling thing, it wasn't about Glenn, it wasn't about fortune and fame.
Yeah.
It was about touching people,
Oh, yeah.
emotionally.
That's-
And hopefully being able to take them out of a very bad situation like that
Sure.
into this world of larger than life characters of good versus evil, and for a little while they could forget their problems. And I realized that even there, and even this thing we call professional wrestling, which is the most worldly of things, that the Lord was using me
Yeah.
for his purposes in a way that I didn't even know.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's powerful, man. But you know what I mean, and that's true. I mean, I was thinking back too, even when I talked to my daughter earlier. I mentioned that to you. The moments that we saw you, doing your thing. For us as a family, it was a connection moment. I think we were all understood. What we're watching is entertainment, but at the same time, it's incredibly athletic. And there's a sense of just using the gifts that God gives you in that moment that really, there's no one better than you in that moment to do what you're doing. And I mean, and you've done that.
And he'll use you. I mean, like I said, you don't even know it.
Yeah.
And then I said, and I consider that a tremendous gift because, I got to see that, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people never do. They never get to see kind of the impact that they might have on the world.
Sure.
And I got to see it. So yeah, that was just one of the greatest moments of my entire life and just an enormous blessing.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, I want to kind of shift a little bit because again, we're talking to you today, and you're taking time out of your day to do this, and but you, man, you're the mayor. I mean, you are. You're not climbing into the squared circle anymore. You are in the throes of politics, wrestling around a little bit. How in the world did you get from Kane to taking off the mask and stepping out of the ring to where you're at right now?
I have just lived an incredibly blessed life. I grew up on a farm in rural northeast Missouri. My family wasn't dirt poor because we had more money than everybody else around us who was dirt poor. But we didn't have a whole lot. And I always wanted to play sports because I thought that would be my pathway to a better life. I had a lot of failures along the way. Hurt my knee. Thought I was going to play professional football. Looked like that was going to happen, and then blew my knee out. And I just kind of fell into professional wrestling. And I mean, I just incredibly blessed. And I wonder how that it's possible for someone like me who grew up in those circumstances to be able to live a life that I've been able to live. And obviously, yes, God has shown his face on me, but also it's because here in this country, anyone can do anything. If you have the talent and are willing to work for it, I mean, there's just no limit to what anyone can do. You have to find what you're good at. But if you do that, you can make it. There's no guarantee, but you can just do anything here. To me, that's what the American dream is all about. Is being able to create the freedom to create the life that you want to live. And I think that's just vitally important. I'm a big believer in what Ronald Reagan said, that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
Right.
And that's really why I got into politics, is I just want to make sure that in whatever way I can, that my kids, and especially now my grandkids, have the freedom to take advantage of their own, to create their own version of the American dream by taking advantage of the opportunities that are available in this country. It's really unique. I've traveled the world. There are not many places, most places where you're born is where you're going to stay,
Yeah.
right? Here that's not the case. Here you move up that socioeconomic ladder. You can also move down it. But I think it's just vitally important. I think we lose sight of that a lot. I think we forget how special this country is and how unique it is.
Right.
And to me, that's really what is unique and special about it.
Right.
Let me sneak one more in, because I first became aware of your, I guess, clout in the political world, because if I'm remembering this correctly, back in the pandemic days, I remember reading and hearing a news story about you speaking out against universal mask mandates.
Yeah.
And of course, and I thought, finally, somebody's got to look at common sense. And then it took me a minute or two to make the jump, though. Glenn Jacobs, oh, that's Kane. Okay, wow, here we go. All right. So I just want you to know, I just appreciate the willingness to be honest and to speak your mind, but also, say something that's a little bit contrary to what the flow was at that time. Because again, you're talking about freedom here, and you became, in that moment, in my eyes, a defender of freedom. Mm-hmm. Agree, disagree, it didn't matter who you were. You were defending freedom, and that's what I heard you saying when that unfolded. Now, did I get that pretty close to right? Okay.
Yep. I was probably one of the very first notable elected officials to start speaking about all the horrible things that were happening during COVID.
Yeah.
Now don't get me wrong. Obviously COVID was a serious health issue. We all know that. I think an even more serious issue, though, was the government overreach that was occurring. You just have government officials shutting down businesses. You have the universal mask mandates, all these things, which are they're tyrannical.
Yeah.
And as early as April of 2020, I was saying we need to reconsider where we're going here.
Yeah.
This is we're not going to any place good. I took a lot of flack for that because, like you said, everybody, it seemed like anyway that everybody was on the other side. And I think what was happening was, as it always is there was a very vocal number of people. And then I think that a lot of folks just didn't say a whole lot, but they probably agreed with me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that kind of goes back to faith, though, too.
It does.
And what I was saying about, I really don't care what people think.
Right.
I thought that was what was right. And I didn't care what other people were going to say about me because I thought that was what was right. And there were a lot of lonely times during that period. But, I felt like I was alone in this world, but I knew that I wasn't with the Lord. Because whether you agreed with my policies or not, I was doing what I thought was right. And that was in alignment with my integrity, which goes back to what the Lord expects. So I thought that I was doing what he expected me to do, even if my policies happen to be wrong. Not the great thing, but in the end, my policies actually turned out to be right.
They did. Well, I appreciate you taking that stand.
We're very blessed. We're very blessed to live here in Florida with Governor Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Boy, Governor DeSantis. Anywhere I go outside the state, I always have people say, "Hey, man, I love your governor. I love your governor." Yeah,
love to go.
Yeah. Well, I love Gutfeld. My wife and I, we watch. A Baptist minister should not be enthralled with Gutfeld, but I watch that guy just about every night, and I've seen you on there a few times, and so I just got to ask, how is that being on the Gutfeld show? Because I know he's pretty spicy with his language sometimes and all.
Yeah, and then some of the things, they go down some rabbit holes, and I am an elected official, and I do have to maintain a certain level of they're great people.
Yeah,
actually. Tyrus was the one that got me on the show. I'm kind of in the normal guest rotation now. So I go up about every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that they allow me to do that because it is a huge show. It has a huge following.
Right.
And I just have to kind of I just have to understand what my numbers are. and then, but I think what makes the show popular is they just say stuff. They say stuff that no one else will, and they say it in a way that is entertaining.
Yeah.
As you said, it can be spicy at times, but at the same time, at least they're saying it. And so much nowadays, people are afraid to say stuff.
Yeah.
Gut felt ain't afraid to say anything.
No, he's not.
That's very refreshing.
Yeah, it is. That's
do you have any higher political aspirations? Such as governor or senator or congressman?
Yeah. So I'm term limited. I will be leaving office in September of next year. And I don't know what I'm going to do next. A lot of folks talked about me running for governor, and I was thinking about it. Then Senator Marsha Blackburn, who I'm good friends with, and I think she'd do a great job. Now she's maybe interested in doing that. So obviously I'm not gonna challenge her because we're friends, and I think she'd do a great job. And it's funny because the media is like, Jacobs is playing coy about running for governor, because I was putting together some stuff. I wasn't playing coy. This is how politics works.
Yeah.
I told everyone, look, I may do that, but things are dynamic.
Sure.
And it's timing and the environment and all this stuff and things that I can't control.
Right.
And that's really how I see things going forward.
Wow.
I don't know.
Okay.
And for me though, I don't have to be in politics. It's not my ego. I could actually make more money doing other things.
Oh, yeah.
So that's not what motivates me. What motivates me is serving my community. As I said earlier, making sure that I do everything I can to preserve the American dream for the next generation. If that fits someplace else, great. If it doesn't, I'm fine with that too.
Okay.
And again, I think that goes back to also my comfort with the Lord. I've never, in my life, there's just a lot of times that I've always, I don't know, it always felt like I was in the middle of this tempest, right? And I'm trying to figure stuff out, and all this stuff's happening. I have to work really hard, and I have to do this, and and now it's like I'm centered, and the sea's calm, and I'm like, I'm good. No matter what happens, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And the Lord's going to take care of me.
Right.
One way or the other, and I just have to trust in that, and I do. So whatever happens, wherever I'm placed next, I'm good with that.
Yeah. Good.
Well, Glenn, I mean, I just want you to know, though, I am, although I am a fan, I also have so much respect for what you're sharing and what you said, because again, I think the measure of man, has nothing to do with height or weight. It is all about the way that we choose to live and being true to following Christ, and you do that. And so I just want to, I appreciate that, because you're a role model for kids, adults, anybody with a lick of sense that wants to say, this is the way you're supposed to approach life. I mean, and that's not common anymore. That really isn't. So thank you for doing that. I mean, thank you for being that way.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it. But I've just been super blessed and super fortunate.
Yeah. Well, my dad used to say that, and other people have said this. He said, but you can tell the true character of a person how he treats those who can do nothing for him. And I can tell you, just by the way you've treated us, man.
Yeah.
I see all kinds of character in you, and we just never will be able to tell you how much we appreciate you taking time to come on the Clash.
Yeah.
We really.
I appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. Thank you all so very much.
Oh, by the way, an old wrestling buddy and we wrote a book called Mr. President with a question mark, and I'm going to send that book to you. Yeah, it's about the world heavyweight champion becoming president of the United States. I think you'll enjoy it.
Well, you may have had a premonition there. Donald Trump's in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Oh, he is. I got to ask you this too. This is on my list of questions I want to ask you. I saw a clip of you, and I remember this happening. You pile drive Pete Rose one day, didn't you?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Okay, so what is it like?
We actually had a kind of a running storyline through multiple WrestleManias in the early years. It was really cool. My first WrestleMania match, WrestleMania is the Super Bowl for WWE.
Yeah.
My first WrestleMania match was against Undertaker. It was in Boston, Massachusetts. And I don't even know where this came from. They just said, hey, Pete Rose is going to be the special announcer for your match, and you're going to tombstone it. And I'm like, well, wow, cool, right? So,
Yeah.
because they would get some celebrities involved and everything. And then Pete goes out, and I'm telling you, if he hadn't been a Hall of Fame baseball player, he'd have been a tremendous wrestling heel. Because he goes out and he gets on the mic and he says, great to be here in Boston. I left some tickets for my friend Billy Buckner, but he couldn't bend down to pick them up.
I remember.
The whole crowd just starts booing it. It was awesome. And then for a moment I was a baby face because then I dropped. Yeah, gave him the Tombstone Pile.
Yeah.
Then he was involved in a couple more WrestleManias where he was trying to get revenge. He never could. We did a commercial. A couple years ago, before he passed away, he'd actually come here to Knoxville, and he was doing a fundraiser for one of the high school baseball teams, and I got to introduce him. And he was, he had a very self-deprecating sense of humor. He didn't take himself seriously at all. Again, I think that he would have been a tremendous wrestler if he hadn't been a baseball player, because in his heart, he was just an entertainer.
Sure,
That's what he really was.
Yeah.
It's really cool. One of my prized possessions is he tried to hit me with a baseball bat at one of the WrestleManias, and then he signed the bat and gave it to me.
That's perfect. That's
awesome.
perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, we need to let this guy go back.
I know you got other things to do. We'd love to talk to you all day, but thank you so much for being with us here on The Clash. And I know our audience is just excited that we've had this conversation. So God bless you as you continue to touch and change the world with the love of Christ. Man, we appreciate you so much.
Thank you all so much. I've really enjoyed our time.
Jeff, I've said this so many times on our show, but that had to have been one of my favorites there.
Yeah, no, and how cool would it have been if at the end we were talking to him about what comes next? He goes, well, I'm going to be the next president of the United States. Were you falling out of your chair at that point? Like, we got it. It's an exclusive right here. So, I don't know. Well, let's start our own movement. Let's Glenn Jacobs for president.
Yeah, Glenn Jacobs for president.
That'd be great.
That would be awesome, because we had the opportunity to interview him, right?
Yeah, that's true. But what you guys need to know is that he, on camera, as you saw, but also off camera, as we got a chance to talk to him, or off recording the interview, the ultimate gentleman. So very gracious with his time, and just so willing to sit down with us and spend this time so we could share it with you. And so, I'm with you. I mean, we've been blessed to talk to a lot of good people, very interesting people. We've heard a lot of amazing stories. But again, this has been a joy, and it's been great fun to kind of have this moment or two with him.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
I would tell you, I'm going to ask you, what's your one takeaway from that interview? I got to tell you, my one takeaway is just that, even though he's a superstar in wrestling, even though he's a superstar in politics right now, he's just an awesome person of character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's my takeaway too.
Yeah.
And I think the underlying theme that we kind of heard, especially if you think about the first episode we did with him and then what we heard today, is it really how his faith, when he got to that moment where he realized, what he needed and who Jesus was, that faith really became a rudder and a stabilizer for him, and continues to be, what guides him through day to day. I mean, he really is touching and changing the world in so many ways.
Yeah.
And impacting the lives of people. And so that's, to me, that's what I take away from this. I mean, what a great guy, a great character, a Christ-like character.
Yeah. We ought to just end The Clash, no more episodes, because we just can't top that.
No, we really can't. So this is our last episode?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No, we'll keep going.
We'll be back next week.
Yeah.
We can't, we can't go away yet. I mean, there's more to talk about. But
I was just funny.
Okay, yeah, that was good.
Yeah. But remember, this week, you remember all this stuff about Glenn Jacobs, a lot of things you could probably take and, apply it to your lives. But whatever you do, don't tap out.